I left all that. He said when he brought his men over here, they said, how many days are we supposed to be here? What are we gonna try to do here? But anyway, they cleaned it out, really, was what they did. And kind of clustered some things.
Did they take your magnolia in?
I didn't have a magnolia. But this one has come up by itself over here. In the middle of the fence. I'm not sure, you know, it's not going to work
so
there.
The magnolia that we cut belonged to the person back there.
That's right.
Just happened to be.
Nothing though. You know, we should have done this years ago when we had kids.
Oh no, they wanted to
They
play baseball back
They would have thrown everything down. But they couldn't because there was so many trees.
Yeah, well, and they weren't the same trees. You know, the trees have changed around here. See, my other men, my spear men, has not done well. I don't know why.
It's not sunny up there.
And they told me to put it in the shade, so I think that was the right thing to do. I need to dig it up. I guess I should dig it up and put it on there.
Just dig up. That Anakwa tree died. So along with all the herbs and stuff, I have a tree coming up. Now, do y'all think Charles needs a little refresher?
Yeah. Looks like you could use that.
It's getting pretty hot out here.
She can't, well,
The reason
he doesn't have that much film, does he? You can't,
No, this reminds me of Mummy and Ninny and Auntie Dick. And that reminds me of when we were all in Harlingen and I wanted you all to drive her car.
Oh, yeah, filling station. She looked over at us. She said that we looked like two little old ladies.
I was following.
How rude.
Lauren was driving and I was following her. And the first thing you did was drive into the wrong place. So I drove in behind you. And as I got about halfway there, you all passed me. So I turned around.
we were trying to lose you.
And when I got to a certain place, you all were turning to try again. And you all look just like Andy and Ninny. And I thought to myself, all of a sudden, we have reached that age. Because you all were sitting kind of down like this, you know, and you were smiling.
You know what's scary? That was 5 years ago.
Oh, how sad.
At least.
Oh gosh! And when we finally drove into the filling station, we were all laughing so hard that everybody in the whole filling station
They
just
said,
stopped.
No, you wait on. No.
And look. Oh,
Well, that reminds me of our trip to Colorado.
Yeah.
And we had to churn in the Chinese restaurant every time we went anywhere in Durango.
Those people would stand at the window. Here they come again.
They're not going to stop and eat food.
Because nobody was ever parked in the parking
I
lot.
thought it was a drive-through. Couldn't find the window.
And it didn't make any difference who was driving. We missed the turn every time. And turned around in the Chinese restaurant parking lot.
Well, you know, poor Ann
Durango.
can't leave San Antonio.
I can get there, but I can't leave.
She can't get out.
I get all
I was
that
worried about
and just go around.
They were going to go to see Sharon. I told her, well, I don't know if you and George will ever get out of there. I don't know who helped you out, really.
Well, we stopped every 15 minutes, and we stopped at the same filling station 3 times. And he said, and the man finally said, I'm going in about 5 minutes. I'll take you. You follow me. We said, oh, thank you so much.
Oh, golly.
And so you did.
Yeah, we waited. And we followed him. He got us.
And you really were able to follow him too.
Yeah, we did. We did real
good.
well.
Oh, gosh.
Finally got out of San Antonio. Thank heavens. Oh, I hate that town.
It's a good thing we never did decide to be pilots, Charles.
Oh my gosh. Can you imagine? Can you imagine? Oh, that's like that, I think it was American Airlines. The guy landed at the naval base instead of the, instead of the airport. And you know, everybody on the plane was going, where's that? This isn't right. Can you imagine how embarrassed that person was?
Poor
Oh my
thing.
gosh. Well, I wonder what he's doing nowadays.
Remember the little old ladies I cut out the clipping about the little ladies that drove on the road and it
Yes.
ended up being a
It
runway?
was a runway.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. I can still picture that happening. I'm waiting for that to happen.
Oh, gosh. She hadn't changed a bit.
Help me remember, we got to call her tonight and remind her that we're coming tomorrow.
Are we going to go to her
Hers
apartment?
first. I had such a good time when I went over to hers. Oh, God. Because, you know,
Oh, you went to
finally
her.
found, yes, finally found it. And I said, well, I see you have a concierge, something or other, apartment. And she said, what? I said, well, where's the concierge? She said, well, I didn't know I had one. I wonder what he does. I'll have to find out. And I said, well, I read the sign. And she said, where? So when we drove out, I showed her where it says, whatever it says. And she said, well, my goodness, I'll have to find out what that means. Oh,
So
goodness.
cute.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Her brother. Buddy.
Oh, Buddy was there.
He reminds me so much of,
Uncle
well,
Bob.
he was just exactly like Uncle Bob.
Is he still living?
No.
No, in fact, the conversation at the meal we had with Fireland's children and nieces, a lot of it was about them going through their daddy's stuff and how many pairs of red socks he had, or
Yeah, he had like 20 pairs of red socks.
Was he a golfer? I mean, why was he?
They didn't know why he had
They didn't know what.
that, and he had
And he
lots
had
of things.
he had like 50 boxes of Miracle Grow. You know,
What do they
it was
say about
it was
me?
like
You better watch out what you put in your potting
it was
shed.
like going to a hardware store. All these boxes of Miracle Grow,
That's why I
and
told you
didn't even have a garden.
deep down, that's why you do these things before your trips. See,
Well,
because you're afraid.
Let me tell you, I just got hysterical one day telling some people that I work with that when I die and my poor children have to go through all my stuff, they're going to find all this stuff that I have saved for someday. All these craft things, I mean, fabrics and all this stuff that, one of these days I'm going to do. And one of these days will be, they're going to find all this stuff packed away.
Well, you keep it in little piles, though, which is nice.
Yeah.
But I have to keep moving it, you see. Like it was all in that new room. We still were calling
The
the
new
room
room.
that we did in the 70s. The
Yeah.
new room. so
Once you have a name,
they said, "What are you going to call the new room?" And I said, "Well, call it the new room." So it's the new room.
Ah, okay. Well, I'll know where to stay when
But when we tore that down, I had to move all this stuff. I went into the bathroom to wash my face, and there was a praying mantis sitting there, about 4 inches long.
Big one.
Not green, but brown.
Wow.
Not that a green green one would have been more welcome, but I really didn't like
Brown ones are scarier.
And I thought I'll just shut the door and he can just have the bathroom until the men come back to finish the addition. And if he's still alive, they can get it out. So then I got thinking in the middle of the night when I have to go to the potty, I do not want to go into the bathroom, into that dark bathroom, and sit down next to the praying mantis because I didn't know where he might be at that time. He might be on the potty too. And, you know, my
that
brand
would scare
new-
him to death, wouldn't it? Whoa! Holy mackerel. That'd be like a horror movie. Just think of him.
I hadn't thought of it from that angle.
You can make a movie out of that.
Somebody did a bug's life.
And so I thought, okay, I've got to get rid of this thing. And I couldn't use my downstairs potty because the Kohler toilet, you know, the new Kohler toilet had already broken. So, and I hadn't fixed it. It still isn't fixed yet. But anyway, so I went down to the kitchen and got a mason jar and came back up. And you know, those praying mantis can see you coming. Because the minute I walked in with my mason jar, he knew what I was going to do. And so he crawled up on the tile, and that was even better because he had been not on a flat part of the sink, but on a part that if I had tried to put the jar down, he could have crawled out, you know. So when he crawled up on the tile, I, you know, came over very quickly and covered him. And then slid a piece of paper in there and got him trapped in that jar and went rushing down to the front door. Because I wanted to put him in my garden because I knew he could do some good out there. And so it was so late that the light, my front porch light, had already clicked off. You know, it's on that automatic timer. So in the dark, I didn't want to just throw him out because I didn't know whether he'd jump back in. So I went to that little cutout part of my front porch and held the jar out like this. Removed the paper and, you know, did like that. And then, you know, came back in the house, shut the front door, and on the way back up the steps, I happened to see he was on the edge of that jar. Well, I almost killed myself jumping. Thank goodness I wasn't very high up on the steps, you know. And I went racing back to the front door, opened it, and did like that, and then slammed the door, turned the light on to check, and then I went racing back up to the bathroom, stood up on the bathtub ledge to inspect myself in the mirror to make sure that he was not, you know, that he had not ridden back into the house on me, you know, because I couldn't see him. It was dark. And of course, he was not there.
You know, it might have been easier just to open the door and set the jar out there and then
Yeah,
just come back in.
Well, you know, that's what I should have done.
You needed that
Or
jar.
just throw the whole jar out.
She's been so nice.
Oh, God.
Keep that jar. Might have to put some preserves in it. Well, I know how to make plum preserves.
You sure do.
Minnie gave me that recipe.
You know, Minnie made the best plum preserves. She made plum preserves when I was out there.
Well,
Just when I lived with
it's
them
a
for 6
secret
weeks.
though, because
Well, she gave me the recipe and we did it.
it only took 800 trips to get. What was it that?
We used everything. We
Well,
used gelatin. We used
We
sugar
finally,
gel.
we finally just resorted to wheat paste.
We used
Little Elmer's
what
glue.
is that stuff, though? There is a name for that stuff.
sugar gel.
Sure gel, is that it?
Yeah. We used
Well,
it.
it sure isn't.
Oh, well.
I have the recipe written down in there like she told it. Well.
Well, she made the best plum preserve. I
Of course she
remember
did.
them from when I lived
And
with
remember
them
the
for 6
pear
weeks.
preserves? I don't know who ever made those.
That was Mama,
Mama.
because she had pear tree in her
Loved
yard.
it.
I used to always think that I would enjoy those pears And when we start to come home, I just really wanted to take a pear with me, and I never did like
That's
to eat
because
those pears.
That's because I
They
picked all of them.
weren't good to eat.
No, they weren't.
They really weren't good
And I
to eat. They
kept
were only
trying
good
to like them.
to preserve.
Yeah,
or
real
something, 'cause They
grainy.
were awful.
And hard, I think.
Hard, and they didn't have a good taste. In
Yeah.
fact, they kind of had a thick taste to them.
Well, I don't remember, but I remember I didn't like. Charles and I were talking about that this morning. How he used to hate to go to Floresville. You know, he just hated to. And I couldn't remember. I remember having a good time there, but I did start thinking about how I hated thinking about having to drink that water and the smell.
I know.
That was the
horrible.
pits.
That was terrible.
One time we were all at Mama's, or maybe I was there. It was just you and me, Corinne. I guess Mommy and Daddy must have been at Scott and White for one of her checkups or something. And I left the gate open, and Big Enough got out.
Big enough was
Big
what?
Enough
The
was
horse?
Jimmy's horse.
Oh, Jimmy's horse.
Oh,
And
God.
Were you in
let-
big enough trouble then?
I was yes.
Boo. Lord heaven.
You know, I didn't know anything about gates. You know, I mean,
Yeah.
I didn't know you were supposed to leave the gate open.
Yep.
I found out. They had to go in the car to get him.
Where was he?
I don't. He was visiting someplace. I don't
He
know.
probably found a mayor.
Well, they found him and brought him back once. But I just remember I was on the front porch and she was in the doorway, greeting us, I guess.
Who was she anyway?
I think she was Mama's sister, wasn't she?
I don't remember.
I thought she was Mama's sister. And
That wouldn't be in the book then.
I don't know. And Uncle Ed, do you all remember Uncle
I
Ed?
know that name.
Mm-hmm.
Well, what was the man's name that had the white beard?
Wow.
Mr. Bailey?
Santa Claus.
No, I think his name was Mr. Bailey. And I don't know how he was connected, but I was out at a house that was not in town. And they had those chairs, those lawn chairs that were made out of bent limbs, you know.
Mhm.
The whole chair was constructed out of, they had those, and that was the first time I'd ever seen chairs like that. And Mr. Bailey was sitting in one of them. And I remember him because he had all that white beard and his hair was white and kind of wiry and everything. And I remember Uncle Ed because he had the biggest ears I've ever seen in my life and this long nose. And he had, big brown spots, all over his skin and deep,
Wasn't
deep
he the
creases.
one that tries to teach us how to milk a cow?
He might have been, and it was probably that same visit.
It was, because I remember
You
trying
remember
to
that?
milk the cow.
Well, he didn't show up anymore when y'all came, probably.
He probably did.
Every time that church would open, we would be there. And we used to sit in the back of the room, and the kids, and during the service, and try to write down all the things that were a sin. We would have pages. You can't believe what wasn't allowed. This preacher we had he was the greatest old man in the world, typically over-fat, overweight Baptist preacher, because he would always come by and eat fried chicken at the ladies' houses that he knew cooked the best fried chicken, and that was quite often my grandmother. But we would sit there and fill out pages on what was a sin. Things like, well, of course, movies and dancing and drinking and cursing, but one of the good ones was mixed bathing. That was a sin. And one Sunday he preached a whole sermon on the sin of owning property at the bay, at the coast. He said that people who own bay houses, they go down and they end up staying on Sunday and missing church, and therefore it's a sin. Well, my dad, being a deacon, got a little upset about that and had words with him. And that really upset Daddy, that he considered owning property at the bay a sin. but that was a good environment to grow up in. I think my grandmother played the organ there all her life. And I was permitted occasionally to go with her. When I was taking piano lessons, I was totally untalented, but I studied a lot. And I could go with her sometime on Saturday. She would always practice on Saturday what she was going to play on Sunday. She didn't need to practice because she knew all that stuff by heart, but she always wanted to practice every Saturday for the Sunday service. And I went with her occasionally, and that organ was just, that was a magnificent machine with all these keyboards and stops and pedals, and she kind of showed me how to operate it. And I don't know if you remember, but in the 60s there was a popular song, Del Shannon did Runaway. And it had an organ solo in it. And I'd gotten the sheet music, and I'd been trying to learn it on the piano, but it was really intended for the organ. And the reason she would go on Saturday is because the church would be deserted. And so I was over there, and she had to go use the telephone or something. And while she was gone, I started playing this Del Shannon rock and roll on the church organ. And I cranked it up to about 9, and it sounded good. It was going, and the windows were starting to rattle a little bit, you know, but it sounded pretty good. Lo and behold, the preacher decided to come by and pick up a book or something in his office. And when he walked in the front of the church, he heard this rock and roll emanating from the sanctuary. Well, he went ballistic. And he charged into that sanctuary, and of course I couldn't hear him because the organ kind of faced the choir. He came up and yanked me off the bench, read me made me kneel with him and pray for forgiveness.
Oh, Charles.
My grandmother was humiliated. I was scared to death, and from that day forward I was forbidden to get close to that organ.
How old were you then?
Oh, I was early high school, I think.
When I was staying with Mama as a little girl, and I'd go outside, because we were always wanting to go outside, she'd say, honey, wear my bonnet. You're going to ruin your skin. And she was right. You know, she went out with gloves on, long sleeves, and her bonnet that had, you know, it came out like this, and it also had that ruffle around the thing to
You
protect
could barely
her neck.
see it. It was like tunnel vision.
And I bet if she were alive today, her skin would look younger than mine does right now because she took care of it and I didn't. And if I'd just known then what I know today, I would have listened to her. Wish I had.
We wouldn't have to be using
Wouldn't have to
this.
be using that stuff.
We'd be just using ivory snow.
You know what? He just wanted to remember. You know, he just wanted.
Well, what do you usually do?
I always took Brandon.
Oh, and they're delicious.
And he said, I just remember them. He said before everybody got so
Healthy.
And I said, well, Johnny, I don't put the brand in because it's healthy.
That's like the way it is.
And I said, besides, I said, I got that recipe from one of Brandon's friends. You know.
But to do it the way she,
From
you
Mo.
have to get the Crisco. Use Crisco like Mommy did.
Well, see, Ms. Rumbeau's one who used brand. I mean, Ms. Rumbeau always made brand rolls. I don't know what she did for.
I'm gonna keep my glass if that's all right with y'all.
Well, I hate to say anything, but I just can't stand that.
So, hands off my glass.
Well, if you're gonna keep yours,
Oh,
I'm gonna keep mine.
he is woman again.
All right, look, Larry, this is mine right here.
Okay.
Now, how are we going to tell each other's apart?
You have to remember where you sat. Can you remember that?
No.
Oh dear. Well, you won't know.
So what are y'all going to do?
Glad you came.
Wave like the politician.
Well, say something.
Oh,